Okay. Hello. How are you?
As someone
Very funny. Very funny. Okay. Welcome. Hi. Super job on the lion. That's
Yes.
gorgeous. I love it.
Yep.
How is everyone? It's been a weekend, right? Like, just what a weekend. Amazing. On also, like, there were, still bad news, but also there's been some pretty darn good news as well. So there's kind of a whole mix of everything, but
there's news. Some of you may already seen in the news this morning about the Pfizer's announcement that they have their vaccine trial with 500 people has 90% efficiency. So that's months away. But
yeah,
that's great news.
It's not bad news.
Yeah.
So yay. Yeah, so all sorts of good news. I don't know if you have been following Biden's speech, which was so nice to hear a good speech, a good political speech coming from the United States. Well written, well presented, grammar and all, which was delightful. But also take a look at, from a science perspective, a biology perspective, take a look, specifically one of the things that Biden mentioned was that on Monday, today, there would be an announcement of the COVID recovery team, pandemic team that he would be putting together. Take a look at who he's starting to name on that team. It gives many of us great hope with just the expertise. So yay. Somebody's asking, where can you find that article about the vaccine?
I retweeted it.
We've retweeted it. There are many articles about it. So all you really need to do is to Google Pfizer vaccine trial, and you'll get all sorts of different perspectives on it. Some of them critical, some of them, maybe a little too optimistic. And so you can learn to kind of balance all of that. Yay, the lion is asking.
Start out with a news organization. Ask the CBC.
The CBC.
Yes, we did get a puppy.
Yeah.
Doug is now 13 weeks old. Dougie the dog.
Dougie the dog.
And yes, also rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah.
Where they need to be.
Whew. So, anyway, it was a good weekend.
Yeah, did we answer the question about the midterm, the Wi-Fi?
If you get kicked off in the middle of the midterm, I'm not sure about all of the logistics associated with that. So the best thing to do is to email us right away. Email Dr. Robertson to figure out how to get back on and to pick it up. Try, if you can, to find a more reliable and more stable connection. This is going to minimize your stress considerably, because if you're always thinking, oh, did it time out? Then it'll probably interfere with your ability to concentrate. But certainly we can come up with some kind of solution. The more that you do on paper, maybe the better, because that can always be photographed and sent in, that kind of deal. So if you're going into this thinking that you do have unstable internet, think about some things that you can do proactively to kind of combat all of that.
Reflect on them. You've spent the whole term thinking about them. I realize that.
Yeah, get in touch with us too, and we can kind of help you brainstorm. That's fine.
Yep. Is the midterm 1 hour or 2? 2.
So
and you can do them. It opens up at 9:30, and
the idea though is that it shouldn't. You can take 2 hours, but it is designed to be like a 45-minute thing. Yeah. But we're giving everybody 2 hours.
So it's one of these things where we've opened up all the length, and the only time prescription we enforce is that you have to have started by 2:30. So you at least have those 2 hours.
That's right. Okay.
2:30 p.m. Guelph time. Wherever that's correct, isn't it? 2:30 p.m. our time.
Yes, everything is Guelph local time. Yeah. Get in touch though if things are kind of going mad, and we'll figure it all out. What else? Anything else?
In
the chat? No.
Did you just walk in on Take On Me by Aha? You did.
Ah.
Yeah. I think The Weeknd and Aha should talk about that thing. And yes, I'll practice the notes.
Okay. Super. So
Is Ottawa the same time zone as Guelph? Yes.
Yes.
You can actually Google that. What time is it in da-da-da?
Yeah. Or time difference between.
Yeah.
And it'll tell you.
Or what is the date in March 2020 increments? It's March 230th?
Oh, I have no idea.
Something like that.
That's weird. Why would you want to do that?
Because it's the pandemic, baby.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. We hope that you are well.
And some of you have midterms today, so good luck.
Good luck. Chem midterm, I hear.
You got this, right?
Yeah, you totally got this. People are saying in the chat that it wasn't that bad, so yay. And I hope that you all have some peace and joy and good luck and clarity when you take it, and with ours as well.
And be outside.
Be outside.
Yeah, stop listening to us. Go outside.
Take advantage of this warming climate. I'm most of the times it worries me, but I have to admit right now I am grateful for the sunshine. And,
we went canoeing.
We went canoeing this weekend.
We had 5 of us in a tandem canoe this weekend.
Lily, she likes to canoe.
Doug. Not yet.
Not Doug, because that would be madness.
That's a bit of a wild
card.
Yep.
Okay. Some of you are probably thinking, get on with the teaching already. We hear you.
Skip to the end.
Skip to the end. Okay. So welcome. And we'll just clear this, although we will screenshot it because do you have it?
I did an earlier one, but now I've got that one.
Now you've got that one? Okay, cool. Save and clear all drawings.
Wait, there's a child in the background?
We forgot to take Jack to school. No. Jack has the sniffles.
Ça c'est notre Jack.
Yep. Okay. Jack, tu vas bien? Yeah. Okay, good. On y va. So here we go. High five on the hairs. Listos.
Empecemos.
So high five on the hares, on the Arctic hares. High five for lots of good news in the world. And we're going to get started. We are totally out of line with the numbering of the lectures.
This is lecture 16.
The only person that knows where we are in all of this is Dr. Robertson. We will fix these things to make sure, and we will post everything. So even if it's out of line, it'll be posted in the right order so that when you're studying and going through things, it will be complete. We promise.
And why aren't they in order? You know,
it's me.
Pandemia.
I can't keep track.
No, it's not you.
It totally is me.
You.
The other day, I literally spent 2 hours staring at something to figure it out in my head that should have taken...
It was the toaster.
3.5 minutes, and I couldn't do the math. I couldn't do it. It was a little disconcerting, so I'm starting to unravel. But you, I think, are still fairly...
Tight.
wound up. Okay. So this is what we hope to accomplish today. We're going to play with scales in our brains and zoom in and out, but this time it's going to be a totally different scale, variable, kind of fun. I'm really actually quite excited to kind of bring it all in because...
And I like this one because I get to be a contrarian, at least to some of the ways we used to present this in terms of regulators and conformers. Because I have...
Yeah, he has thoughts. Okay, so
there's people who are agreeing with your mood, I think.
Yeah, 20 minutes trying to figure out. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. It is so foggy in my brain right now. But here's a new scale. It's a time scale, right? So we've done geographic scales. We've done levels of organization in terms of the hierarchical scales. We've done taxonomic organization as well. Here is a time scale, and it is... I bet some of you are like, just give us precise definitions of things. There is no precise definition according to these timescales because it is relative to the biology. And so we're going to play with it a little bit, and hopefully you'll see how it all connects.
And I love the fact because this does connect. So we're in the physiology unit now. We've finished or are finishing the ecology unit, and we started with the evolution unit. So this is a way that why physiology, maybe the smallest scale, comes last, because it links all 3 of them. So we can sit here in acute and think about like enzymes and catalysis and changing of those things, but we can think about chronic, longer duration at maybe an ecological timescale, and then an evolutionary multi-generational. So it's all here.
Ta-da! Okay, so 3 different sort of periods, kind of, speeds, basically. And the first one is acute. It just means short duration. The next one is chronic. It means longer duration. And the next one is evolutionary, also called generational. We mix them up.
Yep.
So we use them interchangeably.
Interchange, yeah.
Evolutionary, generational, same thing, just means a really long time. Okay, and it's relative. Why?
It must be inheritable.
Yeah. So why might it be relative? Why can we not put sort of specific time periods, say like in terms of hours or number of days or weeks associated with these 3 time scales? Any ideas? Can you pop them in the chat as to why we have to keep it vague?
Lifespan of different organisms. Different animals have different lifespans. Generations can occur over short and long time periods.
Exactly.
Depends on environmental factors too. Lifespans, lots of lifespans.
Lifespans, perfect. That's it.
Lifespans variance per individuals. Life cycles are shorter. Yeah, you guys are...
that's it. So, exactly. As soon as you start to introduce these types of things that are kind of directly related to exposures in a biological system, then the natural history of those individuals or those species being considered set the relative time, right? So super. That's it. Exactly. Done.
Yep.
Okay.
It also has to do with how they interact with the environment. Are they, as we'll learn some words later, are they conformers or are they regulators?
Ah, don't. Here we go.
I love
Next.
those words.
Okay, so basically, the thing that's really important to remember when we talk about timescales and when we talk about physiology is there are timescales associated with exposure of a stressor or a stimulus, and there are timescales associated with the response to that stimulus, okay? So generally, an acute stimulus yields an acute response, and a chronic stimulus yields a chronic response, and a generational stimulus yields a generational response. But that's not always the way it goes, because biology. And so there are some really cool examples where they kind of get, crossed. So it's kind of neat to think about it. And so the answer to any of these questions is, it depends. Let's ask some more questions, right?
This is a great place to start.
That's right.
To orient yourself, to go, okay, you land, you put your feet down and go, okay, if it's this, if it's short, it's this, if it's medium, it's this, if it's long, it's this. Those might change, but then you've landed and you're looking around in the question space.
Yeah. Are any of you wondering what set points is that are on the slide? I imagine that you might be wondering what set points are. And set points, it's kind of neat. So we can come up with some vocabulary heavy kind of definition, but here's what a set point is. When now,
I'm familiar with now.
We're familiar with now.
Remember then?
So now, in November, as the temperatures are supposed to be getting cooler, having come from, through the summer, we're going to start we've already started to wear winter coats, right? It's already snowed a little bit. And so it's like 10 degrees outside and it feels freaking cold, right? And so we wear heavy coats, we start to wear longer pants, and the winter clothes set in quite quickly. Think about what 10 degrees feels like in March, though, or even in February, right? What clothing are you wearing in March or February if it's 10 degrees outside? We see people with shorts in March and February, and that's because essentially our set point has changed. So it changes within an individual, it can, in association with a physiological system, where our sort of we acclimate, we become adjusted to a certain range of conditions, such that any kind of movement outside of that range can feel different, and we respond, right? So we've had our set point over the summer set to higher temperatures, and therefore the lower temperatures cause us to do something immediately, whereas later in the season, after our set points readjust to lower temperatures, we then notice a difference in a higher temperature and we respond. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, cool. And for those of you that really do appreciate some kind of example, understanding, of course, that it always depends. Here are a bit of sort of harder numbers associated with it. Yeah. So when we talk about acute, we're talking generally minutes to hours, but again, it depends, right? Minutes may not even be perceptible, right? That may not even be an acute stimulus because it's a non-stimulus in a certain situation, okay? But the examples are kind of these normal daily fluctuations in temperature, and appropriate biological responses that would be matched to them would be, you know, immediate kind of behavioral things. If the organism is even allowed, sometimes there would be a physiological response. And of course, in an extreme, it could be death. It depends, right? So just kind of take a look. I'm not going to read the whole table to you, but this kind of table just kind of walks you through some kind of ideas of what we might be thinking when we think about these timescales from a very vertebrate-centered perspective.
But I'm sitting here and I can think about examples
of them? Okay.
of beetles or ants on mountaintops exposed to acute temperature stress as there's a sunbeam because there's less cloud and there's an intense sunbeam that heats up a forest floor patch to maybe 40 degrees Celsius, where it should be no warmer than like 9 degrees Celsius. And that sunspot will move on. But if you're stuck there and you can't behaviorally adjust, move. If you can't physiologically respond, if your enzymes don't have the capacity to work at high temperatures, death is the response. So sweating, the EG is vertebrate specific.
Yeah.
But all of those examples have invertebrate examples, and I like it.
Cool.
So much death. Someone's commenting on that. Yeah, the
There's
biological outcome can always include death. And I'm going to remember this one for the set point. The going to Florida for March break. Everyone else is wearing parkas, and you because it's 15 degrees Celsius, and you arrive in t-shirts and shorts.
Exactly. Well done. That's
different
perfect.
Set points.
Different set points. Perfect. Okay.
This is
not going to work,
yes,
or is it going to work? It's going to work. Okay. So check this out. We're looking for you to characterize stimulus and response according to the time scale. So here's an example of acute.
And if your video takes a long time for the asynchronous viewing to upload, it's because I'm having a hard time pulling this out of the middle of it.
Okay.
Thanks, toughest dude. You're welcome. Thanks for coming to the lab. Thank you. I'll never do it again.
There we go.
Yay, Rick
Yay,
Mercer.
Rick Mercer. Okay, so sorry about the lag in the video, but we'll put the link there though, so that you can go and watch it in real time. But we did understand from the chat that you could hear it, so you were hopefully entertained. It was mostly about the either reading the subtitles or listening to the actual talk. Okay, so acute exposure. And an acute response, right? And then as soon as Rick is immersed in the warm bath, things start to change. The physiology of his response start to change. And we kind of go back to the original set point, the original range, right?
Has anybody been through that? You can tell me in the chat.
Oh.
I've fallen through the ice skiing, and I've also paddled. I've been underwater a lot paddling in minus 20 and things like that. So this is from watching that I find amusing a little bit. You've got some other not amusing experiences.
I find it terrifying.
Yeah.
I had an accident in Antarctica where a Zodiac boat that I was driving got flipped over in a katabatic wind coming off of the front of a glacier. And flipped this very large boat over top of me because they end up basically serving like a sail in the wind. anyway, so I was under a boat underwater in Antarctica for a long time. The the ship report says somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes. Yeah, it was a very different experience. My acute response was about 5 or 6 days, where I lost the ability to move my muscles. I had to have adrenaline injections and all sorts of things to be able to recover from it. And even now, my heart, like when I watch cold water, my heart rate goes up, and I can feel that that kind of suction feeling of suffocating as I watch the cold water. So I tend not to go cold water swimming. I stick to baths that are warm. Yeah. And so
some experiences here.
Yeah. Okay. I was in Newfoundland in January. Clumsy self. Yeah, you go.
It was a heckin' cold, I might say, to fall into the ocean out of the boat. Fell through to your hip, walked out of the water, born in Hawaii, hate the cold.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
I
So.
worked at a McDonald's drive-thru at -30 for 8 hours.
Oh, that's chronic. That's not acute. I also used to work at a drive-thru, so I hear ya. Okay. Move it. Oh, there we go. We have a question for you, though. Okay, so we want to now think about what a chronic equivalent to exposure to cold might be, right? So I'm going to throw a little poll at you and see if you can figure out what the equivalent chronic might be. There we go. Okay, just another few seconds, please. Go ahead and get your votes in.
Vote, vote. 81%.
Yeah.
Oh, your percentages are quicker than mine.
No. Okay. We're going to end there and share results. Most of you selected Rick moves to Winnipeg. That's a chronic exposure, absolutely. So it's cold throughout the winter, and then of course it goes through the summer, but generally it is colder in Winnipeg than it is in Ottawa, or wherever it is that Rick is living, although Rick isn't originally from Newfoundland. But certainly the Winnipeg conditions are much colder. So moving there would be a really good chronic exposure equivalent. Taking a freezing cold bath every day, probably not, especially for a very short duration like that. Although I do understand why you may have selected that, because it is but it's a repeated acute exposure rather than a chronic exposure. Okay, super good. Stop sharing and moving on. Okay, so what would Rick have to do to make this acute exposure generational? Let's throw some ideas in the chat if you want, or you can write on the slide. And what responses would you predict might happen for these different time periods?
Kids in Winnipeg.
Very good, very good. So somebody said, start a family in Winnipeg. Super. Have kids in Winnipeg.
Start
That's
a family
right.
in the territories.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. You'd have to have multiple generations. Exactly. So you start to breed there. Very good. And what types of responses would you predict? So that was, the top part was dealing with the exposure. What types of biological responses might you predict? More body hair. I like it. That's good. Shivering is usually an acute response to an acute stimulus. At some points, actually, we know through the late stages of hypothermia that shivering stops, right? As it becomes a chronic exposure, you actually stop shivering. Here we go. Each generation, which one? This one?
Yeah.
More accustomed, more immune to cold. My grandmother is an immigrant. My dad is more cold tolerant than her, and I'm more cold tolerant than him. Super good. So over time, you'll have different set points, which can be beneficial. Increase increase body fat for sure. Family skis more often during the winter. Yeah, less intense reaction to cold weather. Yeah, super good. Okay.
Generational passing down of knitted hats.
Yeah. Very good. I like that one.
Yeah.
The passing down of knitted hats. So certainly, yeah, Rick is going to invest in more clothing probably, right? And that's a cost. That's a biological cost, right? That you wouldn't necessarily be spending on food or whatever, right? Okay, so good. Think about it though in terms of like the time period, the implications, right? Chronic things you do kind of within your own lifetime. Generational things happen over a longer period. There's some element of natural selection potential there and that type of thing, okay? Super.
I read that there is less vasodilation so they can use their hands in the cold more easily.
Oh, that's interesting.
It certainly changes.
Yeah. Okay. Dandruff. Yeah. Lots of dandruff. I like it. Okay. So now, of course, bringing this full circle to biological systems, what happens if we change it up a little bit and we go from a human to a salmonid species? Right? What would we expect? What's the difference? How is the fish going to respond to exposure to freezing cold temperatures? Is it going to be the same, even if it's acute? Is it going to be the same, or is it going to be different? Depending upon, of course, its biology. So what types of things might be the same? What types of things might be different? How might the fish respond in a way that Rick didn't? Go ahead and put that in the chat, or feel free to write on the slide.
Death or worse.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Different.
Fish are very sensitive to changes in temperature.
The fish won't yell. Yeah.
Unlikely to show shrinkage.
Very good.
What happens will be faster due to its body size. Less active in colder weather. Ectothermic be bad.
Yep.
Niche is smaller. More stress on the blood and blood veins.
Yeah.
Fish is going to become the temperature of the water instead of trying to keep warm. Going to shock, possible death. Internal temperature will change to match the environment. Yep.
Super. He'll start to feel fishy. Body temperature adjusts to water temperature. Fish are ectothermic, actually. So can't regulate temperature. So you're totally right. You're totally right in that they can't regulate their temperature, but it's actually the other word, ectothermic. Somebody here writes ectothermic. Well done. Okay, so yes, you notice that Rick's body is trying to fight the conditions, right? Is trying to protect Rick's body from assuming that temperature. The salmonid species can't do that. And so its response is to kind of manage it, right? So there are behavioral responses, physiological responses that would happen in the context of not being able to fight. How long do you think Rick has to live in those conditions versus the fish? Which one may actually be able to kind of survive longer in these cold temperatures, given the different responses? Are we team fish or are we team Rick?
We have some team fish, most team fish, some Rick.
Okay. I'm team fish. What are you?
I'm team fish.
I'm team fish. Yeah. For sure. Team fish. Because I think, all things being equal, of course, right? But if your body is able to kind of prolong and withstand rather than fight, it doesn't fight it, but it kind of adjusts. Team Rick is probably going to go south a lot faster. Good. Cool.
Now that's, it's interesting to think about whether the change we're talking about for Team Rick or Team Fish would be towards the hot or the cold end, and whether or not your answer would change, whether the shock we gave them was towards cold or towards hot, and then to think about, well, why might that be? Why might there be? And then to zoom down instead of thinking about behavioral things and think about enzymatic things, and at which end of a temperature stress are your enzymes more able to deal with an extended cold period or a cold shock or a hot shock.
Yeah, somebody says with hot, I'd be on Team Rick. I think you might be right.
I think you're right.
Yeah, super good. This is, you guys are awesome.
Oh my God, Rick's eyes.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have to talk about conformers and regulators. And we have to understand that that's different from ectothermic and endothermic. How are they different? What are the limitations? What do you want to add something?
I think the terms, I like these terms. I really like these terms. And the terms that you probably have grown up with, the endotherm, ectotherm, poikilotherm, all those, I think are too sticky. I think these work better.
Way better.
Because you can be more specific about in what way you mean.
Yep. Okay.
Certainly better than cold-blooded, hot-blooded. Please don't use that.
That's right. Okay. So, somebody has a question. Raised hand. We've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Ray, if you've got your hand up, if you wouldn't mind putting it in the
chat.
The chat, that would be great. And if you can't access the chat, send us an email. And we'll check our email in just 1 second, okay? You can send it to Smith here. Okay.
Write it on a piece of paper. Put it in your window, facing out. We will run by.
Yes, okay. Okay, or Ray, if you'd like, you can write on the slide what your question is. That's another quick way of getting your question out. Okay, so fish equals conformer. Yes, and it depends. And that's why we want to talk about this. Yep. So good question. The answer is yes, but Sometimes. It depends on what you're talking about, right? Yep. Okay. Okay, so moving on. Here we go. So let's just think about conformity. The idea is that the internal biological environment reflects or matches the external environment for the conditions. And you can see along the bottom on the x-axis, we have salinity and temperature, and it could be pH, or it could be...
Yeah, so these are not really kind of... We could make them intersecting, but for you, as you're graphing this out, and I think do have a piece of paper and be graphing this out, but just choose one. It could be salinity. It could be temperature. It could be...
So imagine we're talking about salinity, right? Because I feel like if we talk about temperature, we get really bogged down with ectotherm, endotherm. So let's talk about salinity. Yeah. Imagine an organism who was a conformer and draw the line of conformity on this graph. So what would you expect the line to look like if we were talking about a conformer? Brilliant. Well done.
You guys are quick on these markers. It's great.
So quick. So good. That's perfect. Okay. Exactly. So there is something called the line of conformity, x equals y, and we don't see any kind of, divergence off of that for the most part. Okay. So that would be like a true conformer where the external environmental condition is equal to the internal condition, right? Good. Okay. Perfect. So this is what it looks like, the line of conformity. You've drawn it very, very well.
And I like here that where we this matches exactly what you drew, except we've emphasized that it's bracketed. Yeah. That it wouldn't continue.
It wouldn't go down to zero.
Each way forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. What happens here in these like theoretical gaps up here and up here? what's going on in the organism. Yeah, very good, Jasmine. Yeah.
Death.
Exactly.
The zone of death.
Super good. The zone of death.
Or
Yeah.
frowny faces.
Yeah, exactly. Super good. Okay. Well done. Here we go. We're going to clear, and we're going to do the same thing for the regulators now. So what would a regulator line look like? Excellent. I like this one. This one's good. Going down. Excellent. Okay. Yes. Oh, this one's good too. Here, we've got this. So we're going to modify that. I like that you're exploring what the ends might look like. I think that that's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's explore a little bit.
It's clear.
Yeah, we're going to clear and clear again. And we're going to take a look. Here we go. So we have our line of conformity. Just to show you the difference for the conformers, we have our regulators, which are basically operating within a zone, and you're absolutely right to do a flat line. That's perfect. At whatever level is, where they're regulating, right? And then, of course, things go wonky at the ends, where there's
I have a question in a second.
Okay, where there's an attempt to regulate, right? Where Rick's body is actively fighting. And if the exposure is not as long and the ability to fight and the reserves that you've got to fight are enough, you may even be able to overcome. But as Madeline indicates, death happens at one end, death also happens at the other end, okay? And a whole suite of different responses would happen.
So if I quote a Rudyard Kipling poem, will that be helpful at this point?
Oh, I think we need Kipling.
No, so there's a good question in the chat. Is the thick blue line the realized niche? Which is a great question. And part of it, not all of it.
Not all of it.
Because that niche, remember when we're talking about niche space, we're talking about a lot of different things. And temperature or some of these elemental abiotic features are the easiest things, the first things for us to measure, but the niche will be multi-dimensional niche space. It won't just be X and Y. This will be one set of axes in n-dimensional space to calculate what the niche is. So yes, but not all of it.
So you've said lots of death around all of these spaces, and there's lots of death around the line of conformity spaces too. So what are the advantages? In the context of environmental change, what are the benefits to being a regulator? What are the benefits to being a conformer? What are the costs associated with being a regulator? And what are the costs associated with being a conformer? Yeah?
I was going to quote Princess Bride, but it's past.
Okay. Moving on, we've gone about 5 minutes over in the other classes lately, and I want to kind of try to get back on to, being on time. We'll do our best. Okay, so hyperregulation and hyporegulation are the words associated with those little arrows going off. One of them you're really trying to hyperregulate, the other you're hyporegulating, trying to bring it down, trying to upregulate it to kind of compensate. And those can be over acute as well as over chronic time periods. Okay. So what kind of animals are conformers, and what about plants? What are plants? I have no idea. We're going to stick to, actually, there's some pretty freaky plants out there, and a beautiful diversity based upon their different adaptations. But we are going to talk about it within an animal-centered context, and we've got a bit of a table for you.
So if you go back 1 second, so we've got not just what, but when.
When. Ooh,
so
good.
What kinds of animals are conformers and maybe when? What kind of animals are regulars and when?
Yeah.
And so, spoiler alert, yes.
Okay, so let's start off nice and simple with mammals when we're talking about temperature. So use your heart stamp. When we're talking about temperature, are they a regulator or a conformer? Super. Very good. If you have any questions, go fill it out. That's great. Yeah, for temperature, fill out the whole thing. Any exceptions, any questions? Nice. Start putting them in there. You're doing all of the work. We don't even have to worry.
Well, there's questions behind our little video there about hibernation that have appeared in the...
Delightful.
Yeah.
Okay, for ions, use your arrow. It's blue. Use your arrow stamp. The stamp that is the arrow, and start filling it out. Good job. Ions, we mean salinity, things like that.
Yeah.
Very good. You can use your name arrow. That's fine too. The arrow, very good. Nice. Questions, exceptions. If you know a species that doesn't quite fit, you'll notice my totally non-monophyletic, my paraphyletic groupings here, right? Reptiles and amphibians.
Good.
That doesn't include birds. What the heck? Terrible, right? Okay, great. Yeah. Bees use wings to make heat.
You got it.
Very good.
They're
Yes.
not alone. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. What about sharks? Very good. Hummingbirds estivate. Excellent. Yes. Okay. You kind of got it. I mean, we don't have to spend too much time here. You've certainly touched on a lot of things. Freeze cycles of amphibians and reptiles. Absolutely. Absolutely correct. Okay. So very good. We can clear that because we've filled it out, and we'll take a look and see whether or not there's anything that's, surprising to you or that you have any questions about. So what I'll do is I will save this one because it's beautiful, and we will clear it and go to the next slide. Oh, it's animated, so it's going to take me a second. There we go. There we go. Good. Cool. Okay, so obviously mammals are regulators, birds as well. Reptiles and amphibians can regulate their ions, but not their temperature. That means internally. It doesn't mean that they don't choose different environments that have different temperatures. It just means that their body can't be responsible or sort of can't maintain body temperature by itself. Fishes, we have the same kind of divide for the most part, although tuna are kind of physiologically freaky. In some areas within their system, they do produce their own heat, and so they do seem to act like endotherms. And then there's this other fish that was just recently discovered also. Oh, and speaking of recent discovery, remember somebody was talking about in the student hours after class, we were talking about whether or not Bigfoot actually exists. And one of the things that we said was that if Bigfoot exists, it's probably only about this big because it would be really hard to like overlook something that was supposed to be actually physically that big. Australia just announced that it discovered 2 new species of mammal, and they are about this big. They're adorable. You have to Google them. They're marsupials. 2 brand new, totally unseen before marsupials.
I think they're Muppets.
You think they're They look like Muppets. They're gorgeous. Anyway, go and take a look. But anyway, so there you go. Okay. Thank you for that. So it all depends, right? Going back to the table here, it depends. Within these groups, there are these tuna or these warm-blooded fish that don't mean that they're not fish, they don't rewrite history books or textbooks, right? But they definitely speak to the possibilities of, that genetic diversity and selection can move into, right? And they definitely open up all sorts of biological questions. So,
Sorry I kept my mouth closed so much because we're going to finish on time about the invertebrate exceptions and examples.
We're totally going to finish on time, and then if you want, we can spend more time on invertebrates. Yeah, okay. But thinking about the vertebrates, all vertebrates are not made equal. They evolved in different contexts. If you take a look at the skin temperature of the polar bear on the left versus the elephant on the right, clearly there are different physiological processes at work and physiological priorities at work. And so we have to start asking these questions, right? What is the context? And the elephant, there are these cold environment equivalents that we're going to spend time looking at, right?
Yep.
So just hold that for a little
Just
bit.
think Ray Romano and Queen Latifah.
It's coming.
And look at those ears. That's
amazing.
like amazing.
Yeah.
And the nose and the eyes.
And the
of
nose
of
and the
both of
eyes and
there.
all of the
Yeah.
things, right? Okay, so we're going to dive into some of that next time. But here's some homework to get you to kind of practice the time scales and the biological levels of organization, how they all fit together.
Match each of them.
So we want you to please take each statement here, A to E, and where it says time and level, what we're looking for is for you to read the statement and to say, oh yeah, that's associated with
Blah, blah, blah.
blah, blah, blah time scale. And that's associated also with
Blah,
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 blah.
blah biological level of
And
organization.
you take your blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
you blah, blah, blah.
No
That's your
surprise,
answer.
right? Okay, so for each of them, write down the correct time scale and the correct biological level of organization. And when we come back on Wednesday, we'll have this exact same list. We'll have our proposed time and level, but one of them will be wrong. So you get to pick which one is the incorrect one by taking a look at your correct answers. Okay? And with that, we will thank you for your time and enthusiasm and participation. Jack says thank you, and we will see you next time.
Take care of each other.